to record. So we're now in play.
Okay, good.
Let's let everybody in. Right, and I guess various people will be coming
right
as and when. So we can't see anybody, but we can see lots of names.
That's okay.
Right.
So, people.
Hi, everybody. I can see lots of names, and I guess more and more people will come as we go through the evening. So we're lucky to have Richard here this evening and going through this sort of discussion debate. And you're going to be seeing this sort of conversation of what me and Richard have got to say. I'm sure there'll be plenty to discuss. And with regards to anyone who's got questions at the end, just stick it in the chat and we'll try and get to them if we don't keep chatting. So hopefully, if you have any questions, stick it in the chat and I'll look at it as we go along, and something might pop up quite nicely. But feel free to send something across, and we'll fire away. So
I love questions. So the more questions, the better.
Yeah.
So let me just say thank you, Patrick. First of all, for all your work in coordinating illustrators and really getting behind the practice of illustration and giving it the platform and the visibility. That is so appreciated, and for inviting me on here. I'm really happy to be here. So thank you. Thank you all for being here.
We're lucky, Richard. Thank you. So let's get back to this. So screen share. Share the screen. So just like to welcome Richard Haines. I guess we've been speaking for the last year or so loosely via the internet, saying hello to each other. And I've been kind of waiting for a moment for us to get together and have a proper sort of discussion. A little bit different from other talks that I've been having, where it's been more people going through. This is more of a critical debate between me and Richard about what he does. When I say critical, I don't mean that we're going to go off and be academic. It's more critical about what we're doing as illustration as a practice, and it'll be quite fun. So we're not going to go too crazy, but there is a context to it, and I think that's what's quite interesting to me. So the modern day flaneur is the topic, and I guess when I first approached Richard, I wanted to speak to him about who he was and sort of understand his practice. And it's interesting to be a person who is seeing this artist grow over time and understand. And when I went to university, you start seeing these people kind of molding and building and creating, and it isn't just an overnight success, it's a journey. So, and people have seen that journey, so that's quite a nice thing. And this idea of me picking the word as this sort of modern day flaneur is, when I looked at what a flaneur meant in the beginning, it was a sort of a dosser or a loafer. Sort of people saw it as artist people who just did nothing or hung around and stared at the sky, a bit more hippie. And then where, as time's gone on and we've had more about art philosophy and critical thinking, is we went from this sort of Walter Benjamin and looking at Charles Baudelaire and this sort of more scholarly attitude to urban life, looking at the modern world. And I really liked this idea that scholars, artists, writers almost became one. And I think that's what really kind of bonded for me as this sort of voyeur, this looker. So I think, Richard, you could kind of help me, because
I mean, it's we had a little kind of prep talk before this. It's so interesting to hear your description of the word, because flaneur really has changed over the centuries. My understanding of flaneur was to observe. And one reason why I initially responded to the word is my love of Paris And my love of Paris is really about the street life, about the vibrancy, the way the cafes spill out into the street. Just, I mean, I've always been gravitating to cities and the activity of people. I find that endlessly beautiful and compelling. So that's one interpretation of Flaneur. I'd also done some research, and I think around 1860s, very French. I think it was Charles Baudelaire or one of his compatriots took a turtle and tied a ribbon or a leash around it and walked through Paris at that pace to really observe, which I find so, I mean, just the idea of that, the visual of that is extraordinary, but it's also, I mean, it's a very almost pre-Dada surreal statement, just the visual of that. But again, I think as an illustrator, there's nothing more beautiful and compelling than the observation of people, and then having the desire to put it on paper.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I've noticed over the last, I guess, year and a half or 2 years of, you know, setting up Fida and kind of thinking about fashion illustration in a different way is, what are people drawing and what do they observe and how do they observe, and how do we make fashion illustration become more of a force within sort of the fashion world? Because I guess for me is the illustrator is kind of a sort of an additive sometimes, not necessarily yourself, but a lot of the illustrators is like an afterthought, or bring them in as a sort of extra,
right?
Rather than, like, I spoke to David Downton and he said to me there was an amazing moment when he did a cover for Vogue Australia, and he had said, you know, they sent him to the Dorchester, he had stylists for extra helpers, and he just said he didn't know what to do, so he had to get rid of everybody, because he was like, all I want to do is just draw the person. It
I
isn't
totally relate.
production.
Yeah.
And he didn't care about the production because drawing is an art form. And I guess maybe we're in a moment of overproduction. You're justifying these big wages because you've got 1,000 lighting people, you've got sound. It isn't, no, you're just a great artist with a talent who's got skill, whether you click a camera or you're a person who draws on paper. There should be a parallel to each other. And I think, I don't know, it's been a conversation for us.
It's interesting because I mean, I know David, and I have so much admiration, and it's a great story from him. Drawing is, I mean, the converse of observing and really being in humanity. I do find drawing is a very solitary practice, which I love. Like I'm out all the time, especially pre-COVID, looking, and then I come back to my studio and it's really me and a pad of paper and a pen. So it's very engaging. And then I love the process of just kind of turning all that off and going back. And it really is, like David said, it's a very singular practice, which I love.
No, and I think it's the attractive part of it. Like Roald Dahl used to go off into his shed, and he'd sit there with his little desk and his little bit of paper, and he'd write these amazing books. And I think it's the same ability to go away and switch off. And
exactly.
It's 100% focused. And I think that's what's not really appreciated enough, is that ability to be in solitude and just draw or make or sculpt or whatever it is. And I think we're kind of missing that a bit, where people want the overproduction of everything. You need a team and you need a squad to justify things. So,
well, it is interesting just in the past year. I mean, the dynamic of everything has changed so much. I mean, if anything, my time was too much by myself and really no time out on the streets, no time, at parties or at events. And it was really difficult. So I'm looking to get my balance back. But I do think that there's always a need for illustrators and for artists and for what we do. And I do think now, kind of coming into hopefully this post-COVID era, where production will be like, we've really gone in the States, at least, from these huge newscasts to the announcer in their den.
Yeah.
And it's fine. Like there's no huge production. So I think if anything, once we get through this, there'll be another new reason for illustrators, because it really is so low production.
Yeah. Lo-fi, high quality.
I mean, all I need is really a scanner and I'm all set.
And so I guess the next one of the main sort of points that I guess when I finished my master's was about how to edit and to be critical. And I guess as a looker and as an illustrator, and I guess illustrators can create a lot and they can draw a lot. And it's like, what do I show? What do I not show? How to be critical? Are you a work in progress person? And I guess this is some of the debate that some people have had is, you know, the editing. I've spoken to a few artists, and some really edit finite. Where with me, I love the whole sort of studio scene and the mess and the chaos of what I do. Sort of no holds barred, rather than this sort of corporate. I only release small bits.
It's interesting because I mean, for me, I'm not sure. My interpretation of what you're saying is, when I draw, I'm always editing. When I draw, like the two figures here, my practice is to really take away as much that I think is not necessary, and to, excuse me, strip it away. And that, and I hope, brings the viewer in to add their own details or take on it.
Yeah.
So that's my interpretation of editing. I'm not sure if you maybe explain that.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people, like if you had an exhibition, is what goes on the walls.
Oh, I see. And, I mean, look at you. You know, everything goes on the walls here.
And I guess for someone like you, who, you know, they talk about illustrators being quite prolific and creating, you know, drawing a lot and creating lots of volumes of work. And I don't know, when I look at your work, I get a feeling that even though you're editing through drawing, your work, you're willing to go, well, this is what I did today, this is what I did yesterday, this is what I'm working on now. Whether it's perfect or not, you're willing to show the raw edges of who you are, this sort of authenticity. And that's what I think a lot of people gravitate towards you, because they feel it's not only originality, but it's kind of this, there's a little error over there, but I'm willing to have that there. And there's like the torn bits of paper. And,
I see. Yeah. But I think that to me is process. That to me is my kind of plea to people looking at my work, of just saying, I'm so imperfect. And I'm so in my process. And when I started, I mean, just a very quick background, I've always loved to draw, even as a 5-year-old. And I moved to New York thinking I would be an illustrator, and I wound up in fashion design. And about 12, 13 years ago, when I really started my career in illustration, it was really the beginning of social media, and things were very technical. And I think because my work was so, you know, spots and smudges and very spontaneous, that there was a humanity to it that I think people really respond to. And especially in that moment when everything was suddenly so technical, people just, and again, it is authentic. It's not calculated. It really is just my process.
And I guess moving on to the next one, which kind of you mentioned about stripping back and editing and sort of looking, is what I see, and when I look at your work, is not only this stripping back, is this nakedness of drawing. And it's kind of it's like me looking inside your mind, or your that's how I feel. So when I look at it, it's like, I'll do this and I'll draw that. And as a person who draws as well, so I can kind of go, wow, you know, he's willing to do this, he's willing to risk that line and make that mark. And it's kind of that stripping back and being sort of honest and naked. That's what, when I see the drawings, I feel that they're naked. And that's what kind of appeals to me in that sort of way, rather than a refined drawing, which feels like it's clothed. When I'm looking at drawing as a sort of human.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing that. I'm so in my process, I really don't think about it. And it's so great to hear someone who really knows drawing talk about it. So I really appreciate it. Again, what's important for me is the constant process of stripping away and removing. And I'm awed by other artists, other draftsmen's ability to be so controlled and so fine and so the opposite of me. I envy that and I really appreciate it. And I said to someone the other day, one of the most difficult things for me when I was younger was being in a studio and they would say, all right, we're going to do 10 1-minute gesture drawings, and I would be in heaven. And when they get to the 45-minute pose, it was just like, I have no, like I'm done in 5 minutes. Now what do I do with the third? I mean, I'll get coffee for everyone, or I'll do more drawings. The most challenging thing for me was the long pose, because I will try it and it always comes out looking really overworked and it loses something. So it's just becomes a process of what I know works for me.
I guess a little bit to do with doing rough. Like I remember more editorial work is you do a rough and maybe send it off. And I always love the roughs. I hate the outcomes.
Right.
And I used to say, I'm just going to go always for the end first. So if you want minor modifications, I'll either draw it again, but I hated the whole idea of do a little bit, do another little bit. It becomes staged and manufactured.
I completely relate. My agent, who I really, we have such a great relationship, and they know when someone approaches them about a job, my agent says, the last thing you want to do is a lot of changes, because Richard's work will just, and she's very upfront about it, Richard's work will just lose what you're coming to him for. And so, because the hardest thing for me is to do a job and then send it off. And again, they have the right to say this, but to say, you know what, we really don't like the shoes. Maybe we'll go. And it's just like, oh, really? Like, that means I'm really going to redraw the drawing, and I want to bring that spontaneity. So this is really going to be a process. And actually what my agent does is there's one cycle of revisions, and then that's it. Just to kind of nip that in the bud so that the drawings don't completely, like all these drawings that you've put up are all one-offs. They're not redone, but these are not commercial pieces either.
That's the biggest problem, is moving it into the commercial world. Is, I don't know, I always say there's a lot of bad art directors out there who don't have the confidence and the courage to go, you just do it. You just do what you do. And
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, again, I think I've been very fortunate. I mean, there always are changes, and there are clients that don't like the work, which is just the way the world is. But usually by the time people come to me, they know pretty much what to expect. They're not going to get the perfect, pristine drawing. They're going to get something like what you're posting. And so there's kind of a mutual agreement of what the expectation is.
Yeah. And
I do think for young illustrators or people starting out, style evolves and changes, but I think it's really important to stand for something so that when people do come to you, they know what to anticipate.
Yeah, I've had it many times, even with fashion brands, and they've come to me for a certain look and feel, and then they'll say, oh, well, this is totally not what we wanted. It's too aggressive, or the technique's way too aggressive for us. We wanted sort of this. And I was like, well, that's the opposite of what I've done.
Then why
did you come? And so it's, I don't know, it becomes very confusing. So I guess the next part was, looking at artists and artists who I see you rifting off, but you may not have, but it's kind of, I see a parallel, was this George Seurat piece. And I just love the idea of, you've almost captured someone who is staring, who could be a sort of a bourgeois flaneur. And I just think, you know, it was, you know, when I was looking at your drawings and I was like trying to think, is there similarities with anybody? And I don't know if anyone's ever compared Seurat to you, but it was something that popped up because of the water, I guess, reflections. There's a little bit of
it's
colour
interesting. I mean, I haven't had that, and I mean, I'm really flattered. And I think, I mean, I've spent my life, I remember as a kid before the internet, and my parents, you know, Christmas or my birthday, and they'd say, "What do you want?" I'd just say a book of French Impressionists. I mean, I wouldn't say it that articulately, but I just remember seeing, you know, when I was Water Lilies and Lautrec, and even as a young kid, I was just riveted by it. So all those things are always knocking around in my head. So when you put these together, I'm incredibly flattered, and I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think Lautrec is definitely one artist I think a lot of illustrators can relate to, as I think one of the greatest.
I mean, it's
Probably
hard
the
to
greatest.
say that someone is the best, but there was a show of Lautrec in Paris when I was there right pre-COVID. I mean, a huge show, a huge body of work, and his ability to, again, capture those very intimate moments of the prostitute standing or bathing or the couple in bed. I mean, and they're paintings, but they have the intimacy and the spontaneity of just a very quick drawing. And to see just room after room of that, and his posters and the graphicness, I mean, and this was all in a very short span of time. It's really extraordinary. It's really beautiful.
He was because I knew not a lot about art growing up, and then when I went to university and coming across, and funnily enough, I think I bought one book in my life, which was Impressionism. It was a big book, and I think,
Yes,
I don't know
I
why
know
I
the
bought
book.
it, and it was a huge green book, huge, and
Mhm.
I was like, and I never knew why I bought it. It was the only book I bought, and I think it was 80p or something, and it had all of these artists in it, and you can see how technique, and I think I then bought a book on Van Gogh or something like that, and you can just see why you start attracting these pieces to you. You start connecting with them. So it's funny that you were saying, "Oh, I got this book and this is what I requested," and then these sort of late connections that are there. It's something that's sort of instilled in you over time, just
Yeah.
from looking, which
Just
is
from looking, and I mean, I think we're all just kind of walking sponges of what we see around us and what we absorb. And those things have always been, you know, whether I was 10 years old and it was a book, or whether I was in Paris a year and a half ago looking at the, you know, the original pieces. I'm always looking and processing.
that's the magic of it. um, let's see. So the next, I guess, I'm a massive Hockney fan, and I guess most artists who are either illustrators, painters, drawers. David Hockney, I guess, is another one, a living artist who really expands and pushes and fights and wrestles with drawing as a process, photography. And when I saw these water pieces, you know, the Bigger Splash, the film came to mind.
Yeah.
And I was, when I saw these, it was kind of a little bit of a step away from what you usually do. And I really loved the orange paintings where you had the orange in the backdrops. And it felt like a Francis Bacon orange being roaring
Wow.
through. And that's what I saw.
It's interesting. I love the way you put these together, because there's a bit of I know these are maybe 3 or 4 years of work. The water really started out for me partially because it's motion, and because it's very evocative of movement and beauty. But also, I was really, if you see the piece up here with the orange is and this one, these are oil. Usually I work with pen and ink and acrylic. And a couple of years ago, I really wanted to start forcing myself using oil paint, which is really challenging. And one reason why I chose water is that it really helped me break down the form and not be so literal and not be so rigid. I mean, you see here, I'm really breaking it down. And then I took these painting classes in Provincetown, and the first day, the teacher said, try priming your canvas instead of just white, choose a color. And so I chose orange because I was using so many blues, and the blues and the greens just kind of really popped against the orange. But that actually really, really helped me because I'm also so hung up on line. And in order for me to really get more comfortable with painting, I had to let go of line. So in a way, the orange became the negative became the line, if that makes sense. So there's a lot to unpack here. Yeah, and I mean, Hockney, there's a show of Hockney drawings here in New York at the Morgan Library. I know it was one of the first things I did after I got my vaccination, because I could finally go somewhere and be comfortable in a room. And I mean, the drawings are just, they're beyond, there are no words for the brilliance of them.
Yeah.
It's just an incredible artist.
And then I guess the next part was, which I find the most sort of, it's always been a tough one for me, is to conquer yourself and to draw yourself. And I think over I don't know how many years you've been drawing yourself, or having the, I don't know, you can kind of go to this, because you've been drawing yourself and this sort of walking poses, which is what's fascinating. But the idea of taking on yourself as the subject matter.
It's interesting. I started this walking pose. I'm not really sure why, but it goes to motion, and I love the idea that we're always propelling ourselves forward. And the figure has changed over time. It's gotten longer, it's more gestural. But and it's become kind of a signature, but that was never the intent. It just became that way because I can also take this figure and apply it to grocery shopping, or to being outside, or to getting on a subway. This was one of the most recent. It's me just walking around the sofa because there was no place else to go. But what I also like doing, it's a signature, but I'm more comfortable now drawing myself just because I'm more comfortable with myself. But also, yeah, I'm just more comfortable with myself. I'll leave it at that. And the two pieces here, the top piece is by someone who I really admire, and we become very good friends, which I really value. And that is Jean-Philippe Delhomme, who I remember seeing his work in the 90s. He did an ad campaign for Barney's, and it was just, he really brought illustration back in such an amazing way. And he had a studio in Bushwick, which is where I live. And so we'd always have lunch here. And then when I'm in Paris, we meet. And he called me one afternoon here in Brooklyn and said, I'm doing portraits. Will you come and sit for me? And it's an honor. And so I ran over to his studio. And then Boris, who's becoming more of a friend, I don't know as well, lives here in Brooklyn, and they're both brilliant portraits. I mean, for me, it's first of all, it's an honor because I think they're both incredible artists, but it's my losing control, which is a really, really challenging thing. I'm not drawing it. I'm on the other side of this force field. So it's very interesting to see how I look to other artists. But again, I trust these two people, and they're wonderful artists. And again, it's very flattering to be seen by them.
It would be interesting to know from like the likes of Lucian Freud drawing Francis Bacon and vice versa, and what their feelings are. You don't hear much of the artists talking about drawing each other, and they kind of go away and they talk about whatever they're talking. But it's interesting to, like you were saying, like giving over the control, like it's your turn to have the mic and you're going to MC and my turn to DJ now. And it's, I haven't had it happen. The opportunity of someone of being the sitter, and being in many life drawing classes. But I guess I think we took turns in a life drawing class when the model didn't turn up and everyone had a go. But you're kind of just stuck in the situation. But to be invited to be the sitter is, oh, this is serious. And, with like Jean-Philippe and people like that, where he's kind of really growing as well. I guess similar to you is the similar stature of illustrators kind of coming to the forefront. And I think it's great when someone draws you and he captures you so well. And I thought that was amazing.
It was an extraordinary, again, because I'm so used to being on the other side. And I sat in his studio and he really just, when I'm drawing someone, for me, the conversation with the sitter is really important. A, because I'm getting to know them. B, I'm in a way disarming them. I'm getting them more comfortable. And I'm really getting into their psyche, which shows up in the work. And he was really doing that with me. And he was really literally just kind of dabbing paint on the canvas in a very Parisian, nonchalant way. And then I looked at it, it was the most brilliant portrait. Yeah. But that's Jean-Philippe. And I'm sitting here realizing that I owe these two people portraits because now it's my turn to draw them. And it's really intimidating and I'm getting kind of self-conscious about it already.
Yeah, the pressure's on. The
pressure is on. It's two very talented people.
So another topic, I guess, which has been coming up quite a lot to me, and people have been sending me messages, is this the male nude and sort of tackling it and taking it on, and illustrators taking it on, because it's sometimes the nude is seen as a topic for painters and artists and the artists to it, but it really shows that the work, like we always have this debate about an illustrator, but an illustrator is an artist, and you're tackling it, and what I really like seeing is that you're constantly, every so often, it's like a stop from commercial work or whatever it is. Right, I'm getting back to the raw ingredients of this is what I'm passionate about. There's no financial gain in this. It's just something I love to improve my practice. Right. And that's what I see when I see this.
Yeah, when I really started drawing constantly, which is about 13 years ago, and did it also as a career, this is really, to me, all drawings tie together in the practice that we all have as illustrators and artists. But this to me was really moving to Brooklyn and also just owning myself as a gay man and meeting so many guys in this area and really just having the opportunity to draw them and record them. And a big part of this is, again, really the conversations I have with these people that reveals themselves. And so the reveal is not necessarily all about a physical reveal, but it's also an emotional reveal. And I think because I'm older and I just have a lot of experience asking people questions, that it becomes a very comfortable conversation about, tell me about yourself. And that really informs the process of drawing someone. So it's a kind of physical and mental exposure. The nude, the guy lying across the bed, was done on Zoom, which is one of the few Zoom drawings I did. This friend of mine orchestrated a group to get together and hired a model. It was very challenging to do it on a Zoom because just the camera distorts, but it was great to just draw.
Yeah.
It's always great to draw.
And I know lots of photographers have had the same, I guess it's another way of you decoding something, whether it's on a screen, in a magazine, right? Because usually you'll see the 3D form, where now it's a 3D form in a flat. And I think that's the hardest part.
It's the hardest part. I mean, when I've done it a few times, and the first time I did it, I kept trying to force it to be the same as having a person in front of me in my apartment or in my studio. And it's just not the same, because there's a barrier, there's a distortion, there's just a way that the body is seen that's really different. So once I accepted that, then it became easier, and I wasn't trying to make it something that it's really not. But I can't wait to get back to being able to draw people one-on-one. Again, it's just, there's that connection that I've really missed over the past year.
Yeah. And I'm just moving on to the next one. So one thing I remember growing up and seeing art was the Van Gogh chair, and looking at chairs as sort of inanimate objects becoming the human. And I saw on your Instagram, this is my favorite chair. And I quite like the idea of this sort of, right, that's my favorite. I really love this chair, and the style of it. And and then you've got this sort of more comfortable orange chair. And I remember seeing Hockney's chairs, and I remember reading in the Guardian or something, and they were saying, oh, Hockney's losing his touch because he was loosening up. And I think at the same period, he was drawing the sunflowers and using them really vivid colors. And everyone was seeing a departure from his not hyper realistic, but his more realistic painting, and drifting over to this more, I'm just going to go for it sort of attitude.
Which is a normal process. I mean, as he should. I mean, that's his privilege, and that's what an artist does. It's interesting about chairs. I mean, I really started to fall in love with chairs just being in Paris and going to museums, and I think someone needs to mute. And there's so much history and so much personality in these chairs. A woman contacted me who's been a curator at the Metropolitan Museum, who wrote a book about her experience with objects at the Met, and did one chapter, which is a story of I think Spanish or French 17th century chair, as observing the life around it and how much it missed having people use it, as opposed to being kind of cordoned off in a museum. But we immediately had this conversation about the character and the personality and the uniqueness of chairs. I mean, again, I love old chairs because they're like us. They just kind of absorb and wear, and they have patina, and they just get more character as they get older.
Yeah, and I think a chair is the perfect, because you're sitting on it, it follows you around. It's a perfect object for, because most objects you might discard, but a chair you tend to somehow never want to get rid of. I've got an old Eames chair, and it goes from studio to studio.
Exactly.
And, you don't want to get rid of it because it's kind of part of you. It's your.
They become friends, and they absorb us. They're kind of the negative force of our bodies. I mean, this chair that's the charcoal drawing is right next to me, and it's one of the things I've had the oldest, and I bought it at a tag sale, and it's completely, the velvet's wearing off, it's decrepit, the paint chips, but I love all that. I mean, that to me is because there's just so much history and so much personality there.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I hope we're not. So the next part that kind of I saw is when I was at university, when I was doing my degree, and they were saying, like, get inside the model, get inside the person. And we spoke a little bit about this earlier, is I see this sort of, well, with Little Richard as well, but this idea of this sort of mini me, you inside all of your characters that you capture. I feel that that's what I'm seeing quite a lot of when I see your work. No matter who you're drawing, is whether it's in the style or whether it's the personality of the person, and it's who you draw is almost a reflection of you, who you want to convey as well. And I think that's what's quite fascinating, is that your work really says who you look at and who you enjoy to look at and who you want to capture. and that is part of your sort of integrity as a person as well. And I think that's quite, from looking at these drawings, is what, and when I looked at your old blog, you know, what I saw today, who you select, so selecting, the editing, and then like the hat. When I saw this with the guy with the hat, I was like, it's him. He's there. So I don't know if you feel that when you see your work, or
no, I love hearing. I mean, it's so interesting to hear your take on it, and it's so spot on. And I it hasn't come up recently, but I know when I started drawing as a career, people would say, "Oh, everything's so long." I mean, I'm 6'2". I don't know if they're how that interprets in UK, but I don't think of myself as tall. I guess I am tall, but I see everything, I guess, as a projection of myself, which is very linear and very vertical, which, I mean, you see that on the page here. And the hat just even makes it more of a vertical. I mean, the knit cap really just started as a thing. I don't even know why, but I mean, it is interesting, and I wasn't aware of it when I was drawing. I mean, it just kind of adds to the vertical force here. But I love hats just because it's another way of kind of being, it's my personality. There's no other real reason for that. But I do think it's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I was going to say, does every artist bring a little piece of themselves into a drawing? It's a really interesting, I don't know that. That's a huge generalization, but yeah, I mean, there always is an element of me, and I do see the world in a very, very particular way. And actually, to be honest, I'd forgotten about it, so thank you for reminding me.
No, it was good. And it was, I when I was looking at the sort of presentation and kind of working through it, it almost works back to where you were in the beginning. And when I listen to talks, and I've listened to various things about you, and you know, where you the hardship, and then doing a blog, and then rebuilding your whole sort of life in the arts. And I think that's something that should be you know, commended for, because a lot of people don't either give up, go into a new field, or get lost or whatever. And I think what I found quite sort of great about what you're doing is, you know, you've kind of had a hard time, went back to the basics, and then kind of what I saw today, and then built this thing, and then you've kind of rejuvenated yourself. And I think that's, a lot of illustrators need to understand that the journey isn't so simple. The journey isn't flat.
The journey isn't, I mean, the journey's never flat. I don't think it is for anyone, no matter what they do. That's just because of the way life is. But just, I mean, I don't know if people are aware of this. I mean, I was a designer for many years, a fashion designer, working for big American companies like Calvin Klein and Perry Ellis. When I hit around 55 is when the economy in the States tanked. I was aged out of these big creative director jobs. And partially, I didn't really know what else to do. No one would hire me for anything. No one would hire me for design anymore because they could pay someone much younger, much less money. No one would hire me. I tried to get jobs as a sales guy at J. Crew. No one would hire me. So this, in a way, I feel very fortunate. But people think that I made this grand gesture to start drawing. It was really the only thing I knew how to do. And I went to this, a friend of mine called me and said, "Oh, Martha Stewart is doing a TV show on bloggers." This was when blogging was new. And so I got a ticket and went. I was in the audience. And at the end, she said, it was like Oprah. She said, "Everyone gets a free scanner." And, you know, we were all like, "Oh my God, it was like getting a free car." And so that's how I really started the blog. It was just, now I finally have a scanner. And I just remember starting to scan drawings and post them. And it was so extraordinary because anyone around the world had access to my work. And it's still, I think, an extraordinary part of social media, just the access that we have and the access people have to us. Yeah. So I feel very fortunate, but it was never today I'm going to become an artist. It was just really, I have a 10-year-old kid and I have to buy groceries and I love doing this.
And I think that's the, I guess the most honest part of it is reality kicks in and it's right. I have to get back to what I can do.
Right.
And drawing's one of the things that I can do. That's free. I just need pencils and a bit of
Exactly.
paper, and
Exactly.
and just get on with it. And it's a tough one, but look where we are today. So it's good news. Sometimes a bit of hardship changes the channel and flips the coin, and something nice comes.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about this with someone the other day. I mean, hardship is when one's in the middle of hardship, that's why it's called hardship. It's not easy. I feel fortunate because I could work my way out of it and I had something to offer and to work on. I do think that everyone has their own element of hardship at some point in their lives. But for me, it also really stripped away a lot of, at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about authenticity. The hardship really just stripped away a lot of stuff that I thought I needed that I really didn't need. It's kind of like early Maria Kondo, just kind of find out what your joy is. And my joy is really drawing and being around people.
No, great. I think we may be on to questions. Well, hard work pays. I kind of wanted to end
perfect
on this sort of page here was, this person's studio and images everywhere, and it's just like, this is it, guys. Hard graft and passion and love and enjoying what you do. And I think, it's great. It's great for other illustrators, and it's great for me to speak to you and share this conversation with people. And I think it's important, as a person who's worked as an illustrator, worked in brands as well, and just to see, COVID's caused this for me as well, is to kind of rethink. There's not enough dialogue happening. Who's going to do it?
Right.
And I was like, well, someone's got to, let's get this illustration thing sorted.
No, it's great. I mean, I commend you, and I brought that up at the beginning. I do think that when I moved to New York, I met a few illustrators. One, Kenneth Paul Block, who was an extraordinary fashion illustrator. He did Women's Wear Daily, and he did a department store called Lord & Taylor. And he was the top of his field, and I was very young. And I remember meeting him, and he was very generous with his time, and I really appreciated that. So I feel like now it's my turn to do that, to share what I've learned and to impart whatever I can with someone, and that actually makes my life more richer, fuller. I gave one masterclass, just a little plug, and I'm giving another one the end of April about drawing at fashion shows. I think it's important to really pass on what we know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, no, I guess I'm coming to that point where I've worked with all these people, I've learned all this information, and there's lots of illustrators who are coming through, and there's not enough. It isn't about support, but information. And
information, yeah.
It's just information and sort of just an arm or a shoulder to say, look, it isn't easy. Go for it. If you want a nice life, art is always going to be a tough one, and it's because you're critical on your art and you're critical about your earnings, but you don't do it for that. You do it for the love of it, and you're born into it.
I do. I mean, I have a 23-year-old, and they went to school for photography, and they came home once and said, Dad, the teacher said that for our class, we'll never make money, you'll always be broke. And I lost it.
Yeah.
I said that, first of all, that's not the case. That to be an artist doesn't necessarily mean to starve or hardship. And I thought, what a negative, detrimental thing to say. I think I have a very abundant life of doing what I love to do. Are there other ways to make more money? Yeah, but this is my bliss. So, but I do think, and it has its elements of hardship, everything does, but I think that there are ways to be creative and to forge out a really wonderful life.
And I think anyone who does art, it's kind of ingrained in you, and you do it for
Yeah.
free anyway. we can't tell the
Well, I don't
commercial
know.
but
Don't tell my agent that.
no,
I do. I don't. Maybe this is a very New York thing or a very American thing. I don't. I believe in being compensated for one's
yeah,
talent and for one's work. People would approach me, especially when I was started doing this, and they'd expect things for free. And this is something. It's a part of us, and I do think it has value. And I think people have to be taught that it is something of value, and to appreciate it, and to not think that it's really a giveaway.
yeah. And that's a conversation we've had in the early days about surviving. One of our first talks was about surviving as an illustrator, and it is having the courage to say, I need, I have bills, like you have bills, you have a company, well, I need to survive as well. So it's only fair if you want something, or you come around and cut, do some building work or clean my dishes. But you're asking the same thing if you want me to draw. It's my job.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's it. It's a job.
I do think it took me a really long time. When I started illustrating, I don't know if I'm talking to, when I started illustrating, I put on my blog, and I was really broke, that I would do portraits for $50, and New York Magazine picked it up and put in their best bets. And I had so many people contacting me. And then 7 years later, I'd have someone contact me and say, are you still doing portraits for $50? And I'd say, well, I'm not even close to, like, you missed that boat years ago. And and it was really, but that's why I have an agent and a gallery to write. They do the heavy lifting. That's not a conversation I have with people, but yeah, to anyone out there, own your stuff, and practice stating what it's worth, and really getting behind that.
Yeah.
It takes practice. I understand that.
And before we say, because we've hit an hour, but I'm going to try and unshare. So just to let you know, so these were some books I found
Amazing.
on the topic of the flaneur and the female flaneur, the woman who walks around the city. There's Jason Brooks. There's your guy Jean-Philippe for Louis Vuitton. So these are just little books that I saw, and I know. Well, Richard might have a book coming out one day. I don't know, but we'll wait and see.
That's another conversation.
That's another conversation.
That's another hour.
But I'm gonna stop sharing now. And if anyone has any questions, I don't know. I see some stuff in the chat. Let's have a look. So anyone who's had rather than saying we're inspired, let's. At what point in your career did you get an agent, and does the agent take it up a notch? So in your career, when you got an agent, did they make your money go up a lot more, or?
Yes.
Right.
That's part of their job. That's part. It's not, oh, I'm signing with Richard, I'm going to make money. It's more, I see my agent, we're partners. My agent sees the value in what I do. I see the value in what they do. So it's really, and a good agent, like an agent for Hollywood, will nurture their career and build up their portfolio so that it really is something of value. And that's really, it's a relationship, and that's really what my agent has done, and I really, really appreciate that. So yeah, and it took me a really long time to find an agent, and there are very few of them. And I always say it's like dating, which is, I'm sure anyone knows what that's like. It's not fun, it's not easy. But it's once you kind of hit it, it's a really valuable relationship. But it took me a lot of just sending out emails and not getting responses, and it took longer than I thought, but it was worth it.
And someone's written here, do you miss being a fashion designer?
No. I mean, I like being around clothes, but I love fashion, but I love my relationship to fashion now, which is go in, do the drawing, and then leave. Fashion design is an extraordinary uh, venue of creation, but it is the most challenging, problematic. Every step of the way of fashion design is filled with problems of the fabric coming in wrong, the buttons don't match, the buyer sends it back. I mean, the fact that anyone does it, and a lot of people do it and do it beautifully, I think is commendable. But I know what goes on behind that, and it's truly a labor of love. So
Yeah.
I was more than happy to walk away from it and be in the audience drawing it, as opposed to being in the back pinning it together.
And I think that let's have a look if there's any more in point of your career agent. I think that's more or less it. But I don't. I'm trying to think if there was anything else while we've got you here. But I guess Corona's coming to an end. Hopefully, I don't know what it's like in New York, but in London, we're nearly allowed to see people, which is since Christmas.
We're New York is I guess is a bubble. A lot of people I know have gotten either 1 or 2 shots. I finished my round. I'm very grateful for it. I have to say, it wasn't the kind of get out of jail free card that I thought it was going to be, of just, yay, everything's fine now. It's taken me a really long time to just get used to being around other people and feeling safe, which I started reading about. I didn't anticipate. It makes sense because I spent a year very guarded about not being around people, which is, as an artist, is so counterintuitive. So I had to really, in a lot of ways, emotionally shut myself down. And now I'm just in the process of reopening. I could have someone here to draw them. I haven't done it because just the idea of someone in this space is something I'm not completely comfortable with. But I'm very grateful for science and the technology of having a vaccine.
And I don't know if there was any. I think was there one more question here? You mentioned doing a drawing and fashion show masterclass. Can anyone join this? So your masterclass, can anyone join it, or?
They're posted, there's a fee for it. And there'll be postings on my Instagram. It's
Okay.
the
And
second one that I'm giving.
is that Somerset House one, or which one is it?
No. It's completely, I'm producing it. I'm doing it on my own.
Good.
I hired someone to help me produce the first one. It actually came off really well. And so I want to do another. And I'm also using this platform now as my public speaking practice, because I just keep saying, and too many times. So I have to go back and go over this with my agent and see how many times I said, I think it was much better.
It was good, but I think everybody has a glitch or a problem. We're not professionals.
I'm not. Someone interviewed me. It was this really lovely guy, Dal, with the Central St. Martin's a couple of weeks ago, and I started playing. The first 5 minutes, it's just me. I was like, this is not sustainable. This is not cool. So I've been a little hyper and animated on this one.
A lot of the artists have said to me previous to this, who I've got in to speak, and they've kind of been very nervous, similar to you, about being a public speaker. And I think, who cares? Just be yourself.
I absolutely agree, but I don't want to get on a Zoom and hear someone say for 5 minutes, because you're really not. I mean, it distracts from the message. And so I'm trying to pause. How's that? That's effective, isn't it? And not say and like.
I feel like I can't speak anymore.
See, it's very okay, whatever.
On the note, if anyone's got any last questions before we go for the night, I saw a few people pop in, but Richard, we're really lucky to have you. It's been
Thank
a
you. I
great,
feel lucky to be here.
it's
Thank
been
you.
a great opportunity just to speak to you again like this, and hopefully, you know, fashion illustration. I think, like you said, we're in a big changing moment. This sort of lo-fi, low-tech experiences, and we recently did, like I invited you as well. We did a bit of an online piece with Alberta Ferretti as just a way to engage illustrators.
That's so great.
Just in a different way of drawing live online, and it was a great success. And hopefully, I see all of these things as triggers to get brands to innovate in a new way and engage with creatives, artists. There's so many opportunities out there to make your brand.
So many opportunities. I mean, I also want to say there's so many different platforms for illustration, especially compared to 10 or 20 years ago. And I'll just say to everyone here, just keep drawing. Keep drawing. Don't lose faith. Everyone has good days and bad days. Keep drawing. And it's an extraordinary thing that we do, and the world needs your beauty and your point of view. So how's that for good ending?
That's a perfect ending. So we'll speak soon, and thank you,
Okay.
Richard.
Thank you all. Thanks.
Time.
Thank you. Thanks.
Have a good
Bye.
night. Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.